So hello and welcome, folks. Today we are going to be enhancing our understanding of and ability to use various communication styles, such as passive, aggressive, and assertive communication. So we're actually going to be viewing some sexuality and gender-related microaggression statements, as a means, though, to empower us to respond to them based on our individual contexts. So I just wanted to kind of give you that content or trigger warning right now that some of the information that we might be viewing might be a little bit upsetting. So please know that at any time you can mute your mic, you can turn off your video, you can go take a break, get a drink of water, you do you, and come back if you so choose and wish. And we'll welcome you to participate at that time. You can also private message me or my co-facilitator, Annalise, if you'd like to have a one-on-one chat. Also, I'm going to be around after the session if you'd like to stay on and chat with me there as well. So I just wanted to let you know that ahead of time. So as I said before, we are going to be familiarizing ourselves with 3 communication styles. So we have assertive, we have passive, and we have aggressive. 3 communication styles. So first of all, what we're going to do is we are going to watch a video. And in this video, there is going to be 3 scenarios that are played out. So as you can guess, the 3 scenarios are going to be a passive communication style, an assertive communication style, and an aggressive communication style. So at the end of each scene, what I'm going to ask you to do is to think about what communication style did the actor on the left portray. So I'm going to ask you to do this via the poll, which I will launch at the appropriate time. So who is ready and excited to watch this fabulous video?
Hi, Mr. Price.
Oh, hey Charlotte, what's up?
Not much. I was gonna ask about the math quiz and something else if you have time.
Which one first?
Let's talk about the math quiz.
All right.
So, back page, I didn't really understand. I kind of lost in math right now. So, like, if you have time, sometime this week, we could talk about that, and I can learn how to do better next time.
I think if you came in tomorrow at lunch, that'd work best. I'll be in my office, so whatever you're confused about, just come and talk to me.
All right, sounds good.
And what was the other thing?
Oh, yeah, on the attendance, my name says Charlotte. Forget about that. My name is Charlie. Everybody else calls me Charlie, so, like, it'd be good if you could call me Charlie.
I don't think so. Yeah, your name's Charlotte.
But, like, it's my human right to be called my preferred name, and my preferred name is Charlie, so I kind of need you to go by that for now.
Well, I think I'm going to stick
That's
with Charlotte.
disrespecting how I feel about myself and how others take on me.
Your
and
tone is very disrespectful.
I don't like your tone, so I'm going to go talk to the office about this.
I think you better. Your attitude, it can leave.
Whatever.
Okay, so right now we're going to ask you to lock in your vote, whether it's passive, aggressive, or assertive communication via the poll. So that should be open right now for you to log that in. So as the numbers are coming in, there's quite a few that are in one category in particular. So we're just waiting on one person to complete their vote. Okay, so it looks like 6 out of 7 of us chose aggressive communication. And let's see if that is correct. And you are correct. So we're going to move on to, the majority was correct. So we're going to move on to the second scenario.
Hey, Mr. Price.
Oh, hey Charlotte, what's up?
Not much. I just had a couple questions about the math quiz and something else if you have time.
Which one first?
Let's talk about the math quiz.
Okay.
I didn't understand the back page at all, so I was wondering if like there was time where we could arrange how I could do better for next time and like understand it more.
Uh, Tomorrow at lunch, if you're not busy, stop by my office and I can help you with whatever you're confused about.
All right, that sounds really good.
And what was the other thing?
Oh yeah, on the attendance list it says my name is Charlotte. My name is Charlie. So if you could just call me that, I'd really appreciate it.
I just don't understand why you'd go by a different name. Like, your name's Charlotte.
Well, yeah, but like, you know how Michael, that's his birth name, but he likes to go by Mike and everybody calls him that?
Yeah.
So do you. It's just like that. My birth name's Charlotte, but I want to be called Charlie because that's just the name I go by, and it'd just be easier if you could call me Charlie.
All right, thanks for helping me understand. I'll make sure to change it to Charlie.
Thanks so much. It means a lot to me.
No problem. See you tomorrow.
Okay, and we are going to lock in our votes again. Okay, so the poll should be available now for you to vote whether or not that is passive, aggressive, or assertive. And we do know just from logic that aggressive has already been selected, so that's probably not one of our options. Okay, so with this one, it's very interesting. There is a tie. So 4 people thought it was the actor on the left was portraying a passive communication style, and 4 people also believed that the actor was portraying an assertive communication style. So let's just see what the correct response would be. So in that case, it was actually assertive, although at times, arguably, some of the
Hey, Mr. Price.
Oh, hey, Charlotte. What's up?
Not much. I just had a couple questions about the math quiz and something else if you have time.
All right, which one first?
Let's talk about the math quiz.
All right.
So the back page, I didn't really understand a lot, and I'm just very confused in math right now. So like, if you have a specific time where we could talk about it and like I could learn how to get better for next time, that'd be great.
Tomorrow at lunch, if you want to stop by my office, I'll be in there and I can help you with whatever you're confused about.
All right, that sounds awesome.
And what was the other thing?
Oh, yeah, on the attendance it says Charlotte. My name is Charlie, so it'd be nice if you could call me Charlie.
Yeah, it says Charlotte on the attendance, so that's just what I'm going to go by.
Yeah, but like this is really important to me.
Yeah, well, if it was really important, it'd be changed, so I'm sticking with Charlotte.
Okay. See you later.
See ya.
Okay, so we are going to lock in our answers again. I'm going to share the poll, and then we are going to see whether or not everyone agrees if that was passive aggressive or an assertive response. So it looks like everyone has had a chance to indicate the response, and 100% of you actually chose passive. And I do realize that some of you actually chose passive for the last session as well, or for the last scene as well. So I was wondering if we could just kind of dissect or kind of debrief the differences between the two. So why would the last scene be classified as passive as opposed to the second scene? So what are some key differences in the two portrayals? Would someone like to share?
I would like to share if that's okay.
Absolutely, Callie.
So the main difference between the assertive and the passive clips was in the assertive one when the person on the left kind of got a little bit of a pushback for what they were asking. They kind of like explained why they wanted to go by the name Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
But in the third scene, when they got that pushback, they were kind of just like, oh, okay, see you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't really advocate for themselves. So for me, that was like the main difference between the second and third one.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So just to further kind of clarify the differences between the 3 communication styles, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to pull up a whiteboard. And what I'd like to do is actually, for each of the communication styles, if we can brainstorm some key characteristics of that particular communication style. So right now we're going to start with passive communication. And if you could just use your annotation feature to kind of scribe some words or some symbols that come to mind when you think of passive communication. So Kelsey has indicated shutting down, or maybe and Mel has talked about being maybe more indirect with what you're saying. So, and then we've had some comments on body language and how body language is huge in terms of communication. So folding arms or backing away, not being confident in our body language or in the words in which we are communicating, perhaps no eye contact if it's culturally appropriate. I think those are all really great responses. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to think a little bit more about aggressive communication. So I'm just going to clear that. And just as we did with the last communication style, we are going to brainstorm some ideas that are associated with aggressive communication. So we have some answers that are coming up are shouting or raising our voice or expressing our anger. And that can be via verbally or with our body language, like maybe clenching fists or throwing things. Perhaps there's more of a dynamic or an open posture, maybe a more firm voice or a deep voice, that is, perhaps not listening to the other person or refusing what they have to say, which is particularly problematic in this situation because somebody is advocating for their human rights to go by their chosen name and pronouns. Hitting things, blaming, confrontational behavior. Those are all really great examples of aggressive communication. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to focus on the last one. And we are going to, in that one would be assertive communication. So as I said before, let's just think of some ideas, some words that come to mind when we hear that word or that concept. So we have being more direct with our wants and our desires and our needs. So clearly and explicitly indicating those and sharing those with another person, being more firm and I guess less flexible in terms of ensuring that people understand and know what you're voicing. Using a calm voice. There's another suggestion with being calm as well. Using your words, setting boundaries, so knowing your boundaries and setting your boundaries in terms of communicating those to other folks, your friends, your family, your colleagues at work, being consistent, being respectful, and being clear. Those are all very, very good words that are associated with this communication style. So thank you all for participating in that. So hopefully through the videos and through this whiteboard activity, we have a more enhanced understanding of the differences between the communication styles. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pose a series of questions. We're going to have a discussion just on communication styles. So what I want people to kind of reflect on is their own personal communication styles with the first question. So what communication style, whether it be aggressive, passive, or assertive, kind of resonated with you? And if you can explain that, that would be great. So there's no right or wrong answer here. So, you know, some of us may communicate in a more passive way or in a more aggressive way or a more assertive way, obviously depending on who we're communicating with and what our context is. So if you'd just like to share your thoughts, that would be great. Callie, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I find that as a Gemini, I tend to walk the very fine line between assertive and aggressive. Even in watching those videos, like I could really see myself in like the first example, which was the aggressive example. I can see myself going to those places, particularly around topics such as name usage or pronoun use. I find that like For myself, especially if the person is giving me pushback, I have very little tolerance for that, and so I kind of just take it there. But if I'm in the right headspace, I definitely can advocate for myself assertively. But it's definitely always about walking that fine line for me.
Absolutely. And I think you've brought up a really important point in terms of the use of communication styles really does kind of relate to our own values and boundaries, and also where we're at on the daily. So, we might have heard somebody might have refused to, grant us our human right, for example, in terms of having our chosen name or pronouns used like the 20th time during that day. And there becomes a point where it's really hard to communicate with that individual in an assertive way, because you might just want to walk away, or you might be just so enraged. So and all of those feelings are obviously valid. So thank you for sharing that. Did anyone else want to Will?
I just wanted to bounce off of what Callie said, is that sometimes, yeah, you might not have the patience to deal with it, and other times you just might not have the drive to, or like the drive. I don't know how to explain it better. The drive to call someone out, and you just say, yeah, call me what you want, just leave me alone, and just not not saying anything is a form of passive communication, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And an example I had, I was in my condo back in London, and two people were complaining about some of the amenities, and like even just like that, using like slurs against a certain group.
Mm-hmm.
And on a different day, I probably would have said something, but I had done like a 12-hour class and everything, and I just like let it go. Like I can't, so sometimes it would be very active, and sometimes very assertive. Let's say, excuse me, that's not appropriate. And that day I just passive. I didn't have the strength to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all situational and situational judgment, I think.
Absolutely. It all depends on your context. And sometimes we might not have the energy or stamina in the moment, but that doesn't mean that we can't revisit that like on a later date, particularly if we have an ongoing relationship with someone of their family, friends, or they live in the same building and things like that. So thanks for sharing. Let's move on to the second question. So this also, and we've kind of touched on it with the first question. So this is kind of a fill in the blank. So the question is, I am often blank, and you're going to choose a communication style, whether passive, aggressive, or assertive. So I'm often blank, and sometimes I wish I were more, and then you choose another communication style. So would anyone like to share? Annalise?
I am often passive,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes sometimes I wish I was aggressive. And sometimes there's just moments that I feel like maybe aggression, not necessarily physical violence, but aggression was the best option for me and my own mental health, and maybe just to feel empowered. And I wish I was more assertive as well, but
yeah, I often think to myself, I'm often hangry, and I wish I was assertive. Yeah. So aggression and hangry are kind of like interchangeable words for me. But I hear you. I'm often a very passive person myself, especially when I'm trying to much like the video where I'm trying to advocate for a human right, for example. And sometimes I know I need to use my words and be a little bit more assertive, especially if it's something that it's that important. Okay, let's go with Kelsey A.
I think for me, I'm similar to Annalise, often passive, and I would like to be more assertive. I think it's a very gendered experience that, I think a lot of women and other gender minorities are taught to be passive and taught to sort of to take things and to take a lot of stuff that they shouldn't take. And so I think it's a radical act. It's a feminist act to be assertive in your rights, to be assertive in your boundaries. And so it's a skill that I continue to work on into my adulthood. So that's definitely something that I'm slowly getting there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think it's really important to understand the gendered kind of expectations in society with respect to communication, and how a lot of women are expected to be more passive or quiet, or not express their understandings, or take up space, and how that is really problematic. And especially if you layer on other social identities such as race, class, sexual orientation, and things like that, and how that's all compounded. So thanks for that. Maisha, did you have a response?
Yeah, I think I often wonder whether we need a word or phrase in between assertive and aggressive. Aggressive has a lot of negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
So I think that I find myself really privileged because I have been socialized into being really assertive from early childhood, and then also have 11 years of communication training to be assertive, aka psychologist.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes I wish I was more direct and confident with my assertion. Like, I am not giving you an option here. Like, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily being verbally or emotionally aggressive or pressurized to you. So maybe sometimes a bit more on the other side, but not, because, I think, adding to what Kelsey and Alicia has said, that particularly I think minority women are very vulnerable and sensitive to get the angry brown woman title very soon. So I think that sometimes also very cautious about not being aggressive. But I was like, no, I actually wanted to be a little towards aggressive, but like, how do I make it clear that this is what needs to happen? I have not played a game with you. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't answer your question. I'm sorry. I just blur.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing. Michael, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so recently on TikTok, sorry to bring that up, but recently on TikTok, I saw a video where it was essentially saying, to kind of go back to the notion of how gender plays into this, it said, women in the business place, and I believe this works as well for sexual romantic gender minorities, in the workplace, and like, instead of saying, sorry about this mistake, say good catch instead. Like, be a leader instead of having these other quotes that we would have. And I feel like that's kind of a shift from passive to assertive, is using certain phrases. So sometimes it's just the wording changes. So I feel like a lot of the examples we've spoken about are body language, inflection of voice, but also the exact words we use, especially in this digital age, when we're sending emails and text messages and whatnot. Just having the right phrases of words also might change whether you're saying something aggressive, passive, or assertive. And I think that going from passive to assertive in a business environment or professional environment is very easy, but a lot of us slip up on it and we just go back to our passive tendencies.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Let's move on to the third question. We kind of already talked about this a bit. So thinking about communication styles, how might someone's identities such as gender, class, race, ability, religion, culture, ethnicity, how might those influence how people interpret their communication style? Mel, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I've been like waiting because I have been raised to be very passive. So I was waiting because I knew I had a lot to say. So, yeah, so I actually turned my camera off because I wanted to go and find this quiz that I had done about like what kind of communicator are you, and I took this leadership course, and it turned out that it was different categories like collaborator, compromiser, avoider, accommodator, or competitor. It's just competes, and I scored like all the same except for compete was like way down there. And the reason I'm telling the story is because like then there's this person, this white woman who was beside me, and she, like, I'd never met this person, we had never spoken before, like she didn't know anything about me. And I said, oh, it's so interesting, I got like, the same score for collaborate, compromise, avoid, accommodate, but 2 out of 30 for compete. She said, oh wow, that really surprises me. I would totally think you're a person who would compete all the time. And I was like, but how would you think, like, know that? I haven't even spoken to you ever, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it is what we have been taught to expect about the results of our communication style. And for me, as a woman with immigrant parents, I was taught that, you know, even the same phrases that other people use to show that they are being assertive, when I use them, I will be I will be denied, first of all, if it's a request, and I'll be like taken out of the running for future opportunities. They'll look at me as a troublemaker. And I think it extends to the messages that we're taught about what happens when we express the need, right? So anyway, that's that's my very long answer to that question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone else? Abby?
Yeah, I mean, this was interesting because I was just listening to responses, and it was just hard to go through this activity without applying my identity of being a person of color while I was listening to everything, because I feel like there is an inherent hierarchy in terms of being assertive, being the ideal characteristic, and being aggressive, being the not ideal characteristic, and being passive somewhere in the middle. But in the culture that I come from, being passive is actually considered the most ideal characteristic, because sometimes being assertive can actually be considered very rude in a social context. Because and even I was reading the facilitator guide, and because I remember you asking us that there are some terms for being passive, and I noticed indecisive in the facilitator guide, but I thought being passive also meant being decisive, because it shows that you don't want to confront the person at that point of time, but maybe you want to take them to the side because you feel it may, hurt their emotions in that conversation. And I just feel like that I was looking at the video and I noticed the color of the skin of the two students, and that also hit me. Like, what if there was a person of color there? What if there was an East Asian or a South Asian in that same conversation? Would you still consider certain things? And again, I feel there's more nuance to this conversation, because in India, for instance, I come from the state of Karnataka, which is in the southern part of the country. We are generally categorized to be more passive, but then in a state like Punjab, being more assertive is considered an ideal characteristic. So I feel like there is more nuance to this, but I would not want to place being assertive as the ideal characteristic. I think integrating cultural perspective is also essential over here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. I think it's really important for us to understand that, and a lot of people spoke to this already, that yes, there are 3 communication styles that are kind of taught within this manual, but really there's none in which that is ideal in every context. And it's really important to be culturally competent and understand who you're communicating with, understand your needs and desires, and also the needs and desires of others when you're communicating, because it's a two-way street, and ensure that you're doing so in a really respectful way in which you're honoring your values and beliefs and being able to convey them, but also respecting obviously where someone else is coming from and their values and beliefs and understanding. So did anyone else want to share anything I think this is a really nuanced conversation that we're having, and it has to be had. So thank you for that. Callie?
Yeah, so I have a pretty, I guess, not to use the word, but like nuanced point of view on this, because I was like, in my upbringing, I think there's like 2 kind of important factors that have helped me develop my communication style. The first is that like I come from a household and like even more of my extended family, we're all very vocal people. You know, when we're not okay with something, or when we're not happy with something, we express it. Or when we're happy with something, or like we express ourselves freely. And also on top of that, being since I'm a trans woman, and so being raised as male and viewed as male for most of my life by society, when I would speak up, I wouldn't meet maybe reactions of, oh, you shouldn't, like, you know what I mean? Like, my voice was never society never tried to like lessen my voice. But now, like, that I have more of like not like a trans woman, and like I have a more feminine presentation and appearance, I've actually encountered a couple of people who are like, oh, simmer down there, like you're, when I like express how I feel. And so it's definitely been like interesting. Like, I guess like as a woman, I don't feel like that same kind of need to not speak. I just, if I have something to say, I say it. And so I think that's like definitely like, and so when we have these conversations and hearing other women talk about how like they feel like they can't use their voice and that's how it's been their entire life, I just feel I don't know, it's just like it's such an interesting and complex conversation for me to personally have. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Maisha?
And I think talking about just experience of being marginalized or minoritized, I think something that also comes to me that because if you have lived through experiences where you have been marginalized and you have learned to speak up through training, experience, and encouragement, sometimes the advocacy may be interpreted as aggressive communication. And it could be a very automatized response for many marginalized people because you say something and we become sensitive to be like, okay, Maisha, you gotta get that out because even we could misperceive something, but that's like a very automatic brain reaction.
Yeah.
So it's also, and that's why when we work with youth, it might be perceived as aggression, but also like paying attention to that could be a very much an automatic response that we see with people who has experienced adversity or marginalization all their life, that they do have to become that person who is advocating for them from the get-go. Sometimes they may not even have the cognitive resources to, you know, do your idealistic communication strategies and be assertive because it's sort of like a survival strategy to always like advocate for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Mel?
And on the flip side of that, for some of us, like who've been raised like me, our survival strategy is to be as passive and non-threatening as possible. That's the only way that we got access to the things that for other people they could use an aggressive or assertive strategy to obtain. So I just want to put that in there, right? Because like, you know, like, and Zoom has been really interesting for me because, you know, that's kind of the last bastion of passiveness that I had to learn because I hadn't been self-monitoring my face because I don't go to mirror in my face because that's weird. Right? So with Zoom, I had to learn that, like to even look passive on camera, right? All over again, so that like people would not always think I was angry at them or that I was waiting to argue with them on Zoom. So it's interesting. Like the word of the day, nuanced. And I think, you know, if I put on my teacher hat or my educator hat, I think that, you know, when educators are teaching this material to students, you know, you really have to have a conversation about, well, like what is it that makes a voice be firm versus a voice being raised, and who decides, like, you know, because it's those kind of things that kids who grew up like me, we didn't get to choose which voice was which, right? Others chose for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and these are conversations that we've had before. So based on our various social locations, people kind of layer on or interpret our communication styles, whereas, you know, that could be something totally different to obviously the person. So a person could simply be advocating for themselves and talking in a sort of manner. However, we do know that that there is a lot of like racial bias and gendered bias in society, and that people think the things that are not always true, and that's the problem. So in terms of communication, the responsibility is on the person who is listening, obviously, whether that is through text or through a conversation, to be responsive and not to project their own values and beliefs with respect to kind of like marginalized social locations. Okay, so, oh, Maisha, do you have something to say?
No, I just wanted to say something to Mel that I totally get that, because I think people who work with me know that it's really hard for me to hide my facial expression. It's very obvious when I don't like something. So I have been practicing just like smiling, and your jaw hurts so much. I'm like, I don't like this.
Yeah. Also, you get a lot of wrinkles. Like I smile all the time, wrinkles galore. Not right. Okay, so thank you all for that very genuine conversation about our different ways in which communication can be kind of interpreted in society. So I think with respect to this program, a lot of the time we kind of like preach that assertive communication is like the bee's knees or the best, but we do know that's not always applicable or ideal in a variety of contexts. And as Abby said, that we do have to take in cultural considerations. So with respect, if we do want to be assertive when we're communicating, the fourth R has developed this kind of like framework. So I'm just going to share it with you really briefly. And it's called Guidelines for Respondent. And each letter in fourth R, there is a word associated with that. So I'm just going to share my screen right now and pull that up just so everybody has a clear understanding of what we're talking about. So these are the guidelines. Hopefully everyone can see them. So the first one is thinking about our feelings. Have we, you know, in terms of locating our feelings, have we been able to express them to folks? You know, thinking about the different options, if there is a win-win situation or compromise, if that's possible, have we ensured that we're able to communicate that? That's not always possible or ideal. So that's a caveat that needs to be stressed right now. Are we, you know, under control? Are we kind of staying calm and collected and being able to communicate our feelings in ways that they will be heard? And remember, that's really on the other person too. So they have to be also calm and collected and being in a position to be able to receive whatever you're going to communicate. So they might not be in agreement with what you're saying, but it's really on them to listen and validate and understand where you're coming from. So that is their responsibility as well. And in terms of the R, we have rights. So am I respecting my own rights and the rights of others when I am communicating my needs and desires, for example? The T stands for talking, you know, so talking assertively or in a way that makes sense for you in that context, being respectful of yourself and the person or persons you're communicating with. Have you been able to communicate what you want to have happen moving forward? So if something was a problem, such as in the video, so the student was talking about how they need to have their chosen name used and not the name that's on the attendance. So, and they were able to communicate in the assertive scene that they want to go by another name and that needs to happen moving forward. And the last thing, the R, is realistic. So we're just keeping it real when we're talking about assertive communication. Does anybody have any questions regarding that framework?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, thanks, Callie.
No, I thought it was a really great guideline. I think it's really helpful. The only one, like, okay, I don't know if take issue is the right way to phrase how I feel.
That's okay.
The whole under control section and am I calm? I just kind of struggle with that because I find that, like, particularly from personal experience, I find that there are situations where that is just not feasible. Like, that's not realistic for me and how I'm feeling in the moment. And I feel like, particularly with like marginalized people, when they are advocating for themselves, this notion of if you are not calm, cool, and collected, they're like villainized for that. And I think that it's just like, as we've been discussing in this session, that like there are so many structures at work that like kind of like place value in being calm, and they don't acknowledge that there are so many contexts where that is just not okay. And so I don't know, I just like, as soon as I saw that, I like, it started like the gears started turning, and I don't know, I feel like,
yeah.
And not to say that it's wrong or incorrect. I mean, I wish I could be calm, cool, and collected all the time, but like, I just think that like, it's not like, I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that like, that's not always possible, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree with you. It's not always feasible or reasonable when somebody is, for example, denying you your human rights, or in any circumstance where you feel incredibly distraught or upset because of what someone's saying or doing. It's not always possible or reasonable or desirable to convey yourself in a particular way. And then it goes back to what Maisha was saying. So the ways in which minorities are policed in terms of the way they communicate is just so heightened. So people are accused of being like too sensitive or angry and all the things, because like after a while, it's like what you said, like you just don't have any F's to give anymore. You cannot reasonably talk to somebody in an assertive manner because it's just too much. So thank you for expressing that. I think it's important to understand the nuances of communication, and it's not always like clear cut, passive, assertive, aggressive, and you can walk in between, or you can go flow in between the communication styles when you're communicating with folks. Mel?
So 2 thoughts. I think here, Alicia, what I'm hearing from you is that this is a great situation in which we acknowledge that all 3 communication styles have their time. Right?
Yeah.
So there are times in which you are angry and you're going to use those feelings of anger to advocate for justice. And so you're going to use an aggressive style to get what you deserve, what you need, what your rights are, right? And I would say, like, for me, like, I've been really into meditation during this pandemic. And for me, that's been the great thing, is because when I'm able to meditate, like I feel all the feelings, and then I also still have my words available when I want to be, and then I can use the combination of understanding, oh, am I feeling this? That must mean this is really important to me. How can I convey this to the person? So I think that's how I've been using that. So I wouldn't necessarily say, am I staying calm, but like, am I aware of myself? Like, you know, or am I like outside my body? Like, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then the other thing, Kelly used the language of take issue with, just hasn't worked for me. So the number one is, have I said how I feel? Because I actually had a boss, when the question asked of me was, Mel, how do you feel? And I said how I felt. And my boss was very upset with me for saying how I feel. And I think if anyone has read any literature about white fragility, I think that there is something to where, like, even the expression of my feelings, even when asked, right, can really feel like I'm harming and being an aggressor to the other person for expressing my feelings. So I just think that, again, when we're teaching to students who've had this experience, it takes some more conversation about when it actually is safe to really be honest, because that's what the conversation I had to have my boss. I had to say, like, so is this a situation in which, you know, it's preferable for me not to be honest about how I'm feeling in this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Context is so important, for sure. Thanks for sharing. So what we're going to do right now, I'm sorry, this conversation is so enlightening and so important, but we're going to actually move on just for the sake of time. And you know, if all situation, like this situation was ideal and like this is the communication style that we wanted to use, we're going to examine some microaggressions, and we are going to come up with some responses to actually communicate our feelings in an assertive way. So right now I'm just going to pull up a PowerPoint. And there's some examples of microaggressions on there. So remember what I said before. So some of this information, some of these statements are obviously problematic because they are microaggressions, and we've experienced a lot of these on the daily if we are sexual, gender, or romantic minorities in particular. So, you know, the content can be heavy, so just letting you know about that. So just going to share my screen right now. Going to pull up, first I'm going to model an example for everyone. So this has to do with asexuality. So one of the problematic statements that are often kind of asserted, unfortunately, to sexual minorities, so those who happen to be asexual, is, you know, that there's something wrong with your hormones. So the statement is, you need to go get your hormones checked out. So a way in which we can assertively respond to this problematic statement is as follows. So it upsets me when you say you need to get your hormones checked out, because it seems like there is something wrong with me. I'm not sexually interested in other people, and this is totally okay, and I am happy being me. So this person was able to indicate, you know, what was problematic about this session or statement, and to also communicate their needs moving forward. So not to say that moving forward, I think is really, really important. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to focus on pansexuality and some of the problematic things that those who are pansexual kind of hear or experience on the regular. So here are some of the statements, and I'm not going to read them aloud, but I'm going to have you just read them on your own. And I'm going to need a volunteer to pick one of these statements and actually respond back using the assertive communication style. So do we have a volunteer that can speak back to one of these really awful things that people often hear?
Will.
Will? Okay, Will, go ahead.
Okay, just pick anyone.
Yep, go ahead and pick anyone.
Okay, let's pick the second from the bottom. The one in quotation, that's just another fad made up by the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think an example of an assertive response and a validating response would be, I take issue with that statement. I find it offensive. My identity is not a fad. I'm not making this up.
Mm-hmm.
That is extremely inappropriate to say, and it's really hurtful.
Absolutely.
And I would appreciate it if I could educate you on the topic further, so that you don't hurt other people like this. Sorry, I keep
That's
adding
okay.
On, you know.
Yeah, all the additions are amazing, so you can keep adding. I'll zippa the lippa.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to move on to another identity. So this one is a poster, so microaggressions of what not to say to people who identify as trans. So do we have a volunteer who would like to speak back to one of these problematic statements in an assertive communication style?
I would love to.
Awesome. Go ahead, Callie.
So I'm going to pick the statement. It's the second blue statement on the left.
Okay.
Statement is, do you still have your real genitals? And so I have two responses to this. My first one, and you're gonna have to bleep this, but it's fuck off. That is not necessarily assertive, but that would that's like my knee-jerk reaction to that. But if I had time to think about what I wanted to say, I would first say that's not something that's appropriate to ask anyone. You wouldn't just walk over to any random person and ask about their genitalia. So first of all, that's not cool. Second of all, I hate the phrasing of real genitals, because it implies that if I have had surgery, that is somehow incorrect and not like it's unnatural and like fake or whatever. So hate that. Also, I just kind of hate the question in general, because it really is connected to like this notion of cisnormativity and heteronormativity, in that like it kind of like by questioning the genitalia of someone, you're really in essence you're tying their genitalia to their gender identity, and you're saying that if you still basically you can't be a man if you don't have a penis, or you can't be a woman if you don't have a vagina, or you can't be whatever if you don't have whatever. So I guess I would say that that's not an appropriate question to ask. You wouldn't just go up and ask anybody that question. It makes me very uncomfortable, and I don't really feel like sharing that information with you. Also, maybe don't ask that. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think your first response, obviously, that would be a reaction, because this is a disgusting thing to ask to someone, as you said, because a lot of the time you would never, ever, ever go up to a cisgender person and ask them about their genitals, right? And it goes back to what you were saying in terms of purposely or unintentionally invalidating someone's personhood, and how that's really problematic. So I'm glad that you were able to respond saying that that is totally inappropriate, and that you shouldn't be asking about that. So thanks
Will
for
has
that.
a comment, Alicia.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I'm reading these and they're all pretty bad. The one on the bottom, I couldn't imagine being transgender, and there's no positive outcome that can come with any communication style that can respond to that. I just couldn't imagine anything positive coming from engaging with someone that speaks like that. It's just there are limitations to communication, period, in some cases, and it's just not incumbent on sexual, gender, romantic minorities to always be in education mode. Even though a lot of us are teachers, there's just no winning sometimes.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you. And it's not our responsibility as sexual, gender, or romantic minorities to always educate folks, right? So, that's why there's Google. That's why there's professional development, that personal and employment professional development. And people have to take that. The majority of folks who are straight and cisgender need to take responsibility, obviously, to not do these things moving forward. But knowing the limitations of society, because it is cisnormative, because it is heteronormative, sometimes we do have to be equipped with some kind of like skills in order to like navigate these really problematic situations. So so thanks for that. Yeah.
But like the nuance here, I think with that was that it's not a microaggression. That's a flat out insult, and
Yeah.
there's no engaging on the off the bat with insults and like that.
Absolutely. And that's why context is so important, because some things, some microaggressions, a lot of microaggressions are like unintentional. They're very hurtful. And obviously the intention is it can be different than the impact, and the impact is hurt or upset or anger and all the things, right? Because it's problematic. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for kind of juxtaposing like all the these problematic statements within the parameters of what we have to within our tool belt, which is these different communication styles. So the last one that we are going to explore is what not to say to people who are lesbian. So do we have a volunteer who would like to talk back to one of these problematic statements?
I can.
Yep, go ahead, Annalise. Oops.
I was like, I haven't chosen one yet.
It would be great if we could just do that and they cease to exist, right, in society. But unfortunately, they do exist, so we're going to have to speak back to them.
I think I'm going to choose the second one from the bottom.
Okay.
Which one of you is the man? Probably respond with some very blunt, no one is, because we don't need one. Mm-hmm. As like a very basic. And then a way that I sometimes like to respond to microaggressions is, especially when they're like intensely personal questions that you would never ask a non-sexual, gender, romantic minority, they'd probably say like, well, in your relationship, like who's the sub or who's the dom, or like something that they don't want to answer necessarily about their personal relationship. Mm-hmm. Just to be like prying. I guess that was more for a different microaggression, but which one of you is the man is just no one is. And then questions like that are hurtful and offensive and indicate that you're probably not somebody that I want to have in my life. But if you do want to learn more about that, mm-hmm. you can Google it and probably refer them to resources if I wasn't in a teaching mood.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that. I think what we're kind of getting at here is that there's a suite of options at your disposal with respect to responding when people use or say microaggressions, whether they're full-blown macroaggressions, that we do have a variety of ways in which we can respond, and those are all valid and those are all contextual. And it's important for us to kind of know where we're at in terms of our own abilities and feelings during that time to actually utilize some of these styles moving forward. So I just kind of want to end the session right now. I want to thank you all for your participation. And as I said before, so each communication style can be useful in a variety of situations. There's no right or wrong. And we do know that there's fluidity between the styles as well. There's no right way to respond, and every person's situation or context is important to consider, and everybody knows themselves the best, right? And what they're able to deal with or how they're able to respond in a certain situation. So, we kind of talked about how sometimes the assertive communication style is perceived to be ideal, but we know that that is not always the case. It's not always reasonable. It's not always safe. And it's not always important to communicate and educate folks when they're saying these problematic things, right? Sometimes we can just, move along, move away from them and just get as far away from them as possible, right? So you know your situation best, and you hopefully will have the tools to make the best communication decision for you in that time. So once again, I just wanted to thank you all for your participation. I'm going to stay on after, just stay on for a little bit if anybody wants to chat through any of these topics. And thank you all and have a great day.